You know, despite the fact that Stellar Blade is about $70 more than I can justify spending on any game, which means I haven't touched the game, it has somehow now become my favorite title, as this game has gone and pissed off so many game journalists so frequently. It's honestly hilarious to see, with Paul Tassi and PC Gamer having absolute meltdowns over the fact that the big booba girl is succeeding in selling massive numbers, with Stellar Blade selling 1 million copies in just 3 days of its initial launch on PC, turning its total sales to 3 million, including the 2 million from back when it was only on PlayStation. This has also led Sony to getting rid of their region locking requirements and many other things, and then this game exploding the mod scene as people are constantly going out there and making these truly phenomenal costumes for Eve, or so I've heard. I'm not looking at them because I don't own the game. But of course, the puritanical freaks over at PC Gamer, Paul Tassi, all these other game urinalists have to throw a massive tantrum because how dare we celebrate such a sexy woman with such a big sword. And they're out here freaking out because the only reason anybody's bothering to play this game is because they're Chinese. Completely waving away the fact that 1 million sales is 1 million sales no matter where you are, and claiming that the only reason this game is making any waves whatsoever is because the Chinese market is just so damn horny, as though they're any different than the American audience, and diminished in any way, shape, or form. Also, the fact that this game is being sold to Chinese markets, that's called common sense. Shift Up is a Chinese studio. This game was made in China. Made for a Chinese audience, well, made for as many audiences as possible, but predominantly appealing to the Chinese market. And then, of course, to top it all off, the head owner of the company Shift Up has finally come out here and made a statement about the mods that these game journalists have panties in a twist about, saying how he has no problem with them because the moment you buy the game, it's your game and you're allowed to do whatever you want with it. Something that maybe Nintendo should take a page out of their book on, because that is pure, unadulterated, pro-consumer attitude. The kind of thing that you like to see. Remember, when Eve's design was first released, the reason why they gave her such a voluptuous rear end was because the developer said himself, when you play as a character, you're going to want to like what you're forced to stare at the entire game. And that is exactly what happened. But of course, that means PC Gamer has to throw the biggest tantrum known to man. So before we get any further, like, subscribe, and let's get into this. So first, to add some fuel to the fire as to why game journalists hate this game so much is because it's so heavily focused on player agency. It allows for you to choose these hyper-sexualized costumes, it allows for you to run it on PC as well as PlayStation, and it allows for you to mod the fuck out of it, to the point where they simply just don't care. As Stellar Blade director rejects the idea of regulating adult mods, once the game is purchased, it belongs to the user. Which the game director and CEO of Shift Up, Hyung Tae Kim, has no interest in trying to please fans' creative interests, as not only does he believe it to be a fool's errand, but he is also a strong component of customer ownership. And this is as we're in a massive trend of companies going out there and censoring mods and censoring players at every turn. Look at the mods to Spider-Man removing pride flags, mods changing games to being as historically accurate as possible in every way, shape, or form, being banned for racism and whatnot, and just the modding community deciding that they know what's best for the gamers when they have no interest in actually listening to us. And of course, journalists having an issue with players ever having any kind of choice whatsoever, because it means that their role is diminished heavily. This is a massive statement to be coming out of such a major studio, or at least such a major up-and-coming one. One of the statements made by the director of the game was that the protagonist Eve is a very appealing sales point in and of herself. Because of that, she's also been subject to preconceived notions, especially overseas. One common issue with character-centric games is data modification, specifically the use of mods. What is your stance or policy regarding this? In turn, Kim straightforwardly asserted, we don't have a set policy on this. In fact, data modification can range from simply increasing the game's speed to completely altering the gameplay itself. As long as it's not being abused, I believe mods can play a positive role by expanding the story and experience of the game. So overall, I view them favorably, he added. That said, there are cases where things approach hacking or interfering with proper function of the game. In those cases, we ask that users be mindful when applying such changes. And to this end, Kim was then pressed for a stance on adult-rated skins, which his host asked him whether nude patches should be regulated or do you view them as a matter of user choice. Standing firm, the Shift Up CEO affirmed, Stellar Blade is rated for adults only, so I don't think there's a strong justification for regulating such mods. Realistically, there's no effective way to regulate them anyway. He admitted, as you probably know, mods have never truly been under full control of the developers. What I am concerned about, though, is not so much the existence of such patches, but the idea of people profiting from them by selling them at high prices. I'd much rather see people enjoy a culture of creation together, like a big party where everyone contributes. And there it is, pure, unadulterated, pro-consumer minded. This is the kind of thing that pisses off the journalists, and of course the journalists are responding in kind, starting off with their lovely review from PC Gamer. PC Gamer seems to be at the front of this war against Stellar Blade for some reason, even though realistically they should be celebrating because it just got ported to the PC, which they're supposedly the purveyor of. And because PC Gamer has no sense of humor whatsoever, they decided to give Stellar Blade a 98. You couldn't have awarded them that one final push, that one final point. You would make fun of the game for being a premier Gooner game, so if you had a sense of humor, you'd at least give it a 69. And what's even more baffling is the person here who's criticizing it, someone by the name of Molly Taylor, who has many articles simping for sexy games that are safe horny and attacking games that aren't, seems to have a criticism that nobody else has mentioned. She doesn't like the level design, something I've heard nobody mention whatsoever. I haven't heard anyone getting lost or finding the tutorial too difficult, but that's pretty much all she complains about that, and claiming that this game is just Nier Automata on horny steroids. As she points to incredibly vague similarities, such as the end of the Earth as we know it, populated by monstrous alien life forms, a scantily clad woman fighting to reclaim planet and save humanity alongside a drone companion, soundtracked by eerie female vehicles that almost stand parallel to the horrors of the world. Great, thank you so much for describing 500,000 different video games. But because it's 2025 and Nier Automata is now seen as empowering, even though when she was first released she was seen as being just as degenerate, and I know for a fact in 10 years' time, Miss Molly Taylor is going to think Eve is some kind of massive feminist victory. And she spends a large amount of time complaining about developers' particular brand of goonery. If you are new to it, however, Stellar Blade has ass shots, sugar physics, and barely their outfits out the wazoo. And then she complains that the world barely ever acknowledges the fact that these are how these creatures are designed. But if I remember correctly, isn't Eve a robot or some kind of biomechanical being who it would make more sense to be scantily clad than not? Another confusing point is that, according to this reviewer, Stellar Blade has a lot of yellow paint, which of course is cringe. No developer should use the yellow paint to point the way, but she also admits to being a yellow paint apologist as somebody who quite likes to see yellow paint painting your way towards your objectives, and yet she only finds a reason to complain about it when it's a game she's already preconceived against. She then has to unfortunately praise the fact that this is a phenomenal port that moves incredibly smoothly and works incredibly well to allow for very little bugs or lag or optimization, as the game is made to work on PC. Far better than any Western developer has ever bothered to deal with. But it's quite odd to see Miss Molly Taylor complain about the game being too goonerish when she wrote an article praising how sexy every single thing is in Date Everything. Now, Date Everything is a bit of a joke game. It's a dating sim, which are already a bad genre, but in this dating sim, every object in your house, and I mean literally everything, is secretly a love partner waiting to come to life. And she's out here praising the designs and how sexy they are and how great their voice acting is, all while attacking Stellar Blade for the exact same points. Just because Stellar Blade is heterosexually coded and not for this queer shit. This is safe horny, whereas Stellar Blade is just normal horny. And they can't have anything that isn't safe horny being around. The other great issues are coming from both X and from PC Gamer. Stellar Blade sold 1 million units in 3 days on PC, and you can mostly thank the Chinese players from PC Gamer. And then Paul Tassi decided to say something similar. The Stellar Blade curve is interesting, as you can see just how Asia-focused it is. Prime gaming time in the US is pretty much its daily low point. Tweet screenshot prevention, I'm not saying this is bad. And while that trend seems to generally hold, Tassi's being disingenuous. By strictly pointing it out, calling out that this is something that exists, you are in fact implying that this is a problem. You are in fact assuming that it is an issue that most of the players are Chinese, and you're using that as a way to devalue the importance of the numbers that Stellar Blade hit. That is your goal. Your goal is to completely wave away the success by simply saying that it's not the Western audience, so it doesn't matter. And that's exactly the same thing that Joshua Wolins is doing over here. Now, Wolins is fun because he's the same dumbass who decided to bitch about the mods, who complained that the Gooner mods were too prevalent, how 40% of mods were just sexy skins, and that's an issue. It's fun to see somebody complaining about the player base of Stellar Blade when they're also at moral oppositions with the game director of Stellar Blade. in which Woolens complains that, have you ever been playing Stellar Blade? If not, you may be some kind of statistical outlier, as Shift Up recently came out and announced the game had sold over 1 million copies on PC in its first 3 days alone, which isn't bad. I've never done a million of anything, let alone in 3 days, so a tip of the hat to the team on that one. No wonder the game crept into Steam's top 100 all-time most played by concurrent players last weekend. It took the 81st spot on Sunday with 192,000 players online at once. Across all platforms, Stellar Blade has sold 3 million copies across its lifetime, so hey, not bad if we're going for us. We make up fully 1/3 of the game's sales just after a few days of availability. Don't underestimate PC gamers. We are pathologically unable to not spend money on things. And also, we're just the best platform. PC gaming is unfortunately the dominant platform, but PC Gamer doesn't represent us, so shut the fuck up. But after he goes and praises Stellar Blade for its legitimate successes, he then goes on, per analysis, Daniel Ahmad via GameSpot, Stellar Blade can attribute the majority of its desktop success to China, where people are apparently going hog wild for the game. Its PC Chinese dub wasn't available on console until the PC version launched, and in the mighty renminbi, the game costs a trifling $38. That is. And I don't see why you compare the price of the game. Of course it's going to be cheaper over there, and it's only $50 here. Sorry, correction, I'm going to say $60. And our money's worth more. Alas, our own reviewer wasn't quite so hot on the game as the notion of China apparently is. Alas, our own reviewer wasn't quite as hot on the game as the nation of China apparently is. Our Molly Taylor handed out a score of 68. Still quite sad for not raising it up one. And then, of course, he goes on to talk about the fact that he did, in fact, complain about the skimpy outfits and a bunch of alarming adult mods. Now, there's something very deceptively vile about this kind of article, and it's very well hidden, I'll give him that. If you notice, this article has barely any words in it. It is an incredibly short article, only spanning about 5 paragraphs, and that's deliberate. It's so that he doesn't have to say anything without saying quite a lot. This is what the Democrats like to refer to as a dog whistle. He wants you to know that he's morally opposed to the success of this game. He wants you to know that he doesn't actually value the 1 million sales. He wants you to know that it's all because of China and not because of the West, and because he values Chinese players less. That somehow diminishes the value of the game. Same thing that Paul Tassi was doing. This is a deliberate act to make it look like this achievement is less momentous, because they value it less because it isn't legitimate according to them. And the only way I can possibly say that is because if it wasn't for that, then why would they bother writing the article? There's absolutely no reason to do these kind of articles diminishing the value of the game by painting it as nothing more than a Chinese success. And I have to wonder if he'd ever be even remotely consistent on this. If any of them were complain, if any of the Western games were highly successful in China, but also widely successful in America, just eating up most of its success in China. The same thing happens to a lot of movies over here. Most of the movies that make a lot of money in the US grab a lot of that box office value from China. About 30% of it comes from China and some of the bigger blockbusters. But of course, it's still just an American victory when it's an American company doing it, but when it's a game or something you don't like, because it's viewed by the Chinese audience, you use it as a point to diminish it pointlessly. This is just another point in the long line of proof that games journalists are not our friends, do not care what gamers want, do not care what gamers think, and their only goal is to diminish the interests of gamers. I thoroughly do not believe that any of these people own a PC strong enough to really play any games, and if they do, I doubt they play them with any joy. Also, I need Stellar Blade to go on a sale so I can justify buying it, because god damn, it looks phenomenal. But that's pretty much all I've got. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the fact that PC Gamer can't seem to control their fifis when it comes to a sexy lady, and I will see you guys on the next one.